I'm going to tell you about the day I asked a question I should never have asked. The day I gave someone a choice that broke the galaxy in half. They tell me I started a war. They're right, but they don't understand why. They weren't there in that cargo hold, staring into eyes that had seen too much, holding a weapon I should have used. They didn't hear her voice when she answered me. They didn't feel the floor drop out from under everything we thought we knew about Mercy. Her name was Esiir. I didn't know that when I found her. Back then, she was just another body in a slave pen aboard a Vrynn Empire supply hauler. Back then, I was just Tyler Cass, human contractor working extraction for the Frontier Coalition, pulling high-value targets out of impossible places for money I never got to spend. I'd done 73 missions in 4 years. Clean work, professional. I'd learned not to ask questions, not to look too hard at the cargo manifests, not to care about anything except the objective and the exit. That last part was a lie I told myself every single day. The Vrynn controlled 18 systems in the outer graves, a region of space where law was a joke and life was cheaper than reactor fuel. They were arthropod descended, 7 feet of chitinous arrogance wrapped in ceremonial plating, and they treated every other species like livestock. The galaxy tolerated them because they controlled the richest veins of exotic matter in known space, and because nobody wanted to fight a war over what happened to people who couldn't defend themselves. Humans had enough problems. We were still recovering from the collapse, still rebuilding our own shattered colonies, still proving we deserved a seat at the big table. So we looked away. We all did. The mission was supposed to be simple. Board the hauler. Extract Dr. Venn Holloway, human astrophysicist who'd been taken by the Vrynn 3 weeks earlier after his research station was raided. Intelligence said he was being transported to their core research facility in the Tarnis system. My team had a 6-hour window while the hauler was in transit through dead space, refueling at an automated depot. Get in, get him, get out. No witnesses, no complications. I should have known better. There are always complications. We breached through the engineering deck, 4 of us. Reeves handled demolitions. Caro ran tech. Singh was our medic and the best shot I'd ever seen. I led because someone had to, and because I was the only one stupid enough to volunteer every time. The Vrynn crew never knew we were aboard until we'd already secured 3 sections and were moving toward the detention blocks. That's when the mission went sideways. The hauler's manifest said they were carrying mining equipment and processed ore. That was technically true, but manifests don't mention the things nobody wants to talk about. We found the first slave pen on Deck 7, 32 individuals, mixed species, chained to the bulkheads in their own filth. The Vrynn didn't bother with cells or barriers. Why would they? Where would anyone run? Reeves wanted to keep moving. He was right. We had a timetable and a single objective. Every second we stayed increased the risk. But I made the mistake of looking into that pen. Made the mistake of seeing faces instead of complications. Made the mistake of being human. We're taking them, I said. Singh didn't argue. Caro started hacking the restraints. Reeves swore and set up defensive positions because he knew I wasn't going to change my mind. That's when the Vrynn patrol found us. That's when everything turned into fire and screaming and the wet sound of exoskeletons cracking under mag rifle rounds. We won. Barely. But the noise brought more of them, and suddenly extraction wasn't just about Dr. Holloway anymore. It was about getting 68 people who couldn't walk straight and couldn't speak standard off a ship that was waking up to our presence like a kicked hive. We fought our way to the shuttle bay. Lost Reeves when a bulkhead charge went wrong. Lost Caro to a Vrynn officer who was faster than any of them should have been. By the time we reached the docking clamps, it was just me and Singh and a crowd of traumatized souls who looked at us like we might be hallucinations. Dr. Holloway wasn't among them. We'd never reached the detention blocks. The mission was a failure by every measurable standard. Except for the 68 lives stumbling into our shuttle. Except for the way they clung to each other as we burned away from the hauler. Except for her. I found Esiir in the back of the cargo hold after we'd jumped to safety. She'd separated herself from the others, pressed into a corner where shadow met bulkhead, her body language screaming that she wanted to disappear. She was Kythreen, a species I'd only heard about in intelligence briefings. Humanoid enough that it hurt to look at her. Skin like polished copper. Darker along the forearms and throat. Eyes too large, pupils vertical, containing colors I didn't have names for. 4 fingers on each hand, delicate and precise. The Kythreen homeworld was somewhere in the Vrynn-controlled space. Past tense. Was. She was watching me with an expression I recognized because I'd worn it myself once, a long time ago. It was the look of someone waiting for the next terrible thing. Someone who'd learned that hope was just another flavor of pain. I should have walked away, should have let Singh handle intake and medical screening, should have focused on the fact that we'd lost 2 people and accomplished nothing except putting a target on our backs. But I didn't. I walked over to that corner, my mag rifle still warm in my hands, and I crouched down so we were eye level. "You're safe now," I said, knowing it was a lie, knowing she knew it too. She didn't respond, just stared at me with those impossible eyes. "Do you understand standard?" I asked. A slight nod. "Careful. Economical. Can you tell me your name?" Silence stretched between us, broken only by the shuttle's engines and the quiet sounds of the other survivors. Then, so soft I almost missed it. "Esiir." "I'm Tyler," I said. "You're aboard a human vessel. We're taking you to a coalition station. They'll process you, find you placement, maybe even repatriation if—" "There is no repatriation." Her voice was wrong. Not the accent or the slight rasp. Something deeper, something broken at the foundation. There is no home. There is nothing to return to. I'd heard that tone before, in my own voice. In the voices of every human who'd survived the collapse and watched their world burn. I knew better than to push, but I also knew the weight of carrying that kind of loss alone. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying me, measuring something. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "Stop." "The mission. You had an objective. We were not part of it. Why did you stop?" That was the question, wasn't it? The one I'd been asking myself since the moment I'd ordered the rescue. The one that had cost Reeves and Caro their lives. The one that made me the kind of fool who couldn't follow simple orders. "Because I looked," I said. "And once you look, you can't pretend you didn't see." She was quiet for a long time. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. It was a terrible sound, sharp and humorless, like glass breaking in slow motion. "You are a fool," she said. "But perhaps that is what humans are. Fools who look." "Maybe," I agreed. "Well, but we're your fools now." I started to stand, to give her space, to return to the cockpit and face the reality of what we'd done. That's when she spoke again. And everything changed. "I can hurt them." I froze. "What?" "The Vrynn. I can hurt them. Truly. Deeply. In ways they will never recover from." Her voice had changed. Still broken, but underneath was something else. Something molten and patient, and absolutely certain. "If you had left me on that ship, this knowledge would have died with me. But you looked. You stopped. And now I am here, and I have a choice I never thought I would have." I turned back to face her. She was standing now, unfolding from the corner like something waking from a long sleep. In the shuttle's harsh lighting, I could see scars I'd missed before, neat lines along her arms and throat. Precise, systematic, the kind that come from medical procedures, not combat. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I worked in their core research facility, Tarnis Prime, before my world fell, before they decided my people were more useful as labor than as partners." The words came faster now, sharper. "I was a xenotech engineer. I designed the quantum coupling systems for their fleet architecture. I know things they spent 300 years developing. I know where they keep their secrets. I know their weaknesses. I know how to make them bleed. My throat went dry. Esiir, you gave me a choice by pulling me off that ship. She interrupted. You gave me something I haven't had in 7 years. So I am going to ask you for another one. She stepped closer, and I saw that her eyes weren't just multicolored. They were burning. What do you want me to do with what I know? That was the moment. Right there. That was when I could have made the safe choice. The smart choice. Could have told her we'd turn the information over to coalition intelligence. Let them handle it through proper channels. Follow protocol. Could have walked away from the fire I saw building behind her eyes. Instead, I asked the question that broke everything. What do you want? She didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Revenge, Esiir said. Total, complete. I want to watch their empire burn. I want them to know what it feels like to lose everything. I want them to understand that they were never as untouchable as they believed. The shuttle felt smaller suddenly, quieter, like the universe was holding its breath. The Vrynn enslaved my entire people, she continued, her voice steady now, controlled, like she'd been rehearsing these words for years. They came to Kythros with treaties and trade agreements. We welcomed them. We shared our technology, our culture, our trust. And when they had learned everything they needed, when they had positioned themselves in every critical system, they activated kill switches we never knew existed. They shut down our planetary defenses, our communications, our transportation grid, everything. In 6 hours, my world went from a thriving civilization to a labor camp. 18 billion people, sorted, categorized, assigned. The useful ones went to research facilities and manufacturing centers. The rest... She paused, and I saw her jaw tighten. The rest were processed for biomass. Organic material is expensive to ship across star systems. I felt sick. Singh was standing in the doorway now, listening. I could see her hand resting on her sidearm, not threatening, just ready. Professional, but her face was carved from stone. How many survived? I asked. Survived? Esiir's laugh was that terrible sound again. We all survived, Tyler. That was the point. The Vrynn don't waste resources. We're alive, we're working, we're building their ships and refining their exotic matter and designing their weapons. We're just not people anymore. We're inventory. How many are still fighting? No one. She said it flatly. There is no resistance, no underground, no hope. They broke us completely. Those who tried to fight in the first years were made examples. Public, creative, thorough. The Vrynn understand psychology. They know that a population will tolerate almost anything if the alternative is watching their children die slowly. But you know something, I said. Something that can hurt them. I know everything. She moved closer, and I could smell the recycled air of the Vrynn hauler still clinging to her, mixed with something sharper, ozone and burnt metal. The quantum coupling system I designed, it's in every major Vrynn vessel, every station, every defensive platform. It's what allows their ships to maintain coherent shielding at faster than light velocities. It's what makes their fleet functionally invincible in deep space combat. And it has a flaw, a fundamental architectural weakness that I built into it 7 years ago, when I still believed someone would come. When I still thought the galaxy would notice what was happening to us. I stared at her. You sabotaged their entire fleet. I left a door, she corrected. A backdoor in the quantum alignment protocols, a very specific sequence of commands that AI, if transmitted on the right frequency at the right amplitude, would cause cascade failure across any networked coupling system. Ships, stations, anything using the technology. Their shields would collapse. Their FTL drives would destabilize. And because the coupling system is integrated with their primary power distribution, the failure would propagate through every connected system. She paused. The Vrynn Empire runs on my designs, and I can shut them down, all of them, simultaneously. Singh spoke from the doorway. That's a death sentence. For you, for anyone who helps you. The Vrynn have allies, resources. They'll burn entire systems to find whoever did it. Yes, Esiir agreed. They will. Which is why I never used it. Because I was alone and powerless, and one person can't fight an empire. Even a clever person with the perfect weapon. You need an army for that. You need allies. You need someone stupid enough to believe it's possible. Her eyes locked onto mine. You need a fool who looks. The weight of what she was offering hit me like a mag round to the chest. This wasn't intelligence we could sell or information we could trade. This was a button that, once pressed, would start a war. A real war. The kind that reshapes star charts and rewrites history books. The kind that kills millions. The kind that might free billions. The coalition won't back us, I said. They'll call it terrorism. They'll disavow any involvement. I know. We'd be hunted. By the Vrynn. By coalition forces. By everyone who profits from the current arrangement. I know. Most of the galaxy will think we're monsters. I know. She tilted her head slightly. Does that change your answer? I looked at Singh. She was my oldest friend. Had served with me since before the collapse. Back when we were both young enough to believe in clear lines between right and wrong. She'd followed me through 73 missions, trusted my judgment even when it was questionable, saved my life more times than I could count. If I said yes to this, I'd be asking her to throw away everything. Her career, her future, possibly her life. She met my eyes and gave me the smallest nod. I turned back to Esiir. War starts today. Something changed in her face. Not a smile. Something older than that. Something that had been waiting a long time to be recognized. Good, she said. Then we have work to do. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life, and I'd lived through the collapse. We couldn't go back to the coalition. The moment we set foot on a registered station, we'd be arrested for the unauthorized rescue operation, for the deaths of Reeves and Caro, for a dozen other violations I'd committed without thinking twice. So we went underground, cashed in every favor I had, called in debts, found people who owed me their lives or their freedom and convinced them to owe me more. We ended up at Rustgate, a decommissioned mining station in the fringe territories where questions cost more than answers. And the local authority figure was whoever had the most guns that day. It was perfect. It was also falling apart, toxic, and populated entirely by people who would sell us out for a hot meal. We made it work. Singh handled security, set up sensor nets and dead drops and early warning systems that would give us maybe 5 minutes if someone came looking. It wasn't much. It was everything. I handled recruitment. Reached out to the 58 other survivors we'd pulled off the Vrynn hauler. Most of them had scattered, trying to disappear into the anonymous masses of the fringe. Some didn't want to be found. But 14 came when I called. 14 people who'd seen the inside of those slave pens and decided they'd rather die fighting than live pretending. Esiir handled the impossible part. She needed equipment, specialized quantum computing hardware, exotic matter samples, access to Vrynn communication protocols, things you couldn't buy, couldn't steal, couldn't even admit you wanted without drawing attention. She needed a lab that could replicate Vrynn technology from memory and salvage. She needed time. She needed a miracle, basically. So we gave her one, piece by piece. Singh and I ran missions, small ones at first, raiding Vrynn supply lines, hitting their automated cargo drones. We learned their patrol patterns, their response times, their blind spots. We learned that the Vrynn weren't invincible. They were just organized and ruthless and very, very confident that no one would dare challenge them seriously. Confidence is a weakness when you've had it too long. We hit a Vrynn research outpost on Kelly's 4. Small facility, 30 personnel, light security. They were studying some kind of exotic particle interaction, running experiments that required isolation from standard spacetime, which meant no backup, no reinforcements, no one to hear them scream. I told myself it was necessary, told myself they were part of the machine that had destroyed an entire civilization. Told myself a lot of things while we moved through those corridors, and Singh put rounds through chitinous armor, and I tried not to think about whether they had families waiting somewhere. We took everything: data cores, equipment. 3 Vrynn scientists who I bound and dragged to our shuttle while they clicked their mandibles in what might have been terror or rage. I couldn't tell the difference. Didn't want to learn. Esiir questioned them for 6 days. I don't know what happened in that sealed section of Rust Gate. I don't know what methods she used or what promises she made or broke. I just know that on the 7th day, she emerged with information that made her hands shake and her eyes bright with something that might have been triumph or might have been horror. I know where they keep the master control node, she said. The central hub for their entire quantum coupling network. It's not in Tarnis. It's older than that. Deeper. Where? I asked. Vrynn Prime, their home world, in the planetary core, shielded by 4,000 kilometers of rock and defense systems. It was their first quantum facility. When they expanded, they never moved the primary node. They just built around it, layers upon layers of redundancy and protection. It's the most secure location in the Empire. Singh whistled low. So it's impossible. Almost, Esiir agreed. But they made one mistake. One tiny flaw in their perfect fortress. The node needs cooling. Exotic matter reactions generate immense heat. They use a planetary-scale thermal management system, channels bored through the mantle, coolant that cycles up from underground reservoirs. And once every 47 hours, they purge the primary coolant lines. Complete flush takes 6 minutes. During that window, the shielding around the access tunnels drops to minimum power, just enough to maintain structural integrity. 6 minutes, I said, to infiltrate Vrynn Prime, reach the planetary core, access their most protected facility, and transmit your shutdown sequence. Yes. That's insane. Yes. She looked at me with those burning eyes. But possible, barely, if we're willing to pay the price. The price. That's what it always came down to. Not whether something could be done, but what you were willing to sacrifice to do it. I'd learned that lesson young, watching my home colony burn during the collapse. Watching people make impossible choices between equally terrible options. Understanding that sometimes the cost of action and the cost of inaction were both unbearable. And you just had to choose which kind of unbearable you could live with. Tell me the plan, I said. Over the next month, we assembled something that might have been an army if we squinted and ignored how outnumbered we were. The 14 survivors from the hauler. 6 human contractors who'd worked with me before and trusted me enough to follow me into something suicidal. 3 Vrynn dissidents who'd defected for reasons they never fully explained, and Esiir, who spent 18 hours a day building the weapon that would either free her people or kill us all trying. The weapon itself was elegant in its simplicity. A modified quantum transmitter, smaller than my fist. All it had to do was get within range of the master node and broadcast Esiir's shutdown sequence. The node would receive it, authenticate it as legitimate traffic, execute the commands, and then cascade failure across the entire network. Every ship, every station, every defensive platform built on Vrynn quantum coupling technology. Simultaneous collapse, empire-wide, permanent. The hard part was delivery. Vrynn Prime was a fortress world, 3 orbital defense stations, constant patrol routes, sensor grids that could detect a grain of sand moving too fast, automated weapon systems and biological screening, and about 47 other layers of security designed to prevent exactly what we were planning. We couldn't fight through that, couldn't sneak through it, couldn't buy our way past it. So we did the only thing that made sense. We walked in the front door. Singh stole a Vrynn transport. Don't ask me how. She had contacts in places I didn't want to know about and skills she'd learned before we met. The transport came with full authentication codes, current clearances, and a cargo manifest listing scientific equipment bound for a research facility on Vrynn Prime. We modified the cargo containers, reinforced them, added life support, packed ourselves inside like ammunition in a mag rifle, and hoped that Vrynn security was as lazy as intelligence suggested. Hoped that their arrogance would blind them to the possibility that someone might be desperate enough to try this. Hoped that we'd get 6 minutes inside their planetary core before everything went wrong. Hope. That most human of weaknesses. That most human of weapons. The transit took 4 days. 4 days in the dark, breathing recycled air, listening to the transport's engines and wondering if the next sound would be alarms or weapon impacts or the hiss of atmosphere venting. Esiir sat across from me in the container, her fingers moving through calculations only she could see, her lips moving silently like she was praying or cursing. Maybe both. On the 3rd day, I asked her what she'd do after. If we survived. If the plan worked. If she got her revenge. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't know, I've been focused on this for 7 years, on surviving long enough to hurt them. I never thought beyond it, never let myself imagine there was an after. There's always an after, I said, if you live long enough. Is there? She looked at me. What's your after, Tyler? What do you do when the mission is over? I didn't have an answer, hadn't let myself think about it either. My after had died with my colony during the collapse. Everything since had been forward motion, missions, objectives, reasons to wake up and keep moving. I'd been running for 15 years and calling it purpose. Maybe we figure it out together, I said finally. If we survive. If we survive, she agreed. We made it through Vrynn security. They scanned the containers, verified the manifest, cleared us for ground delivery. The transport landed at a facility 70 kilometers from the core access point. We waited until the cargo bay was empty, until the handlers had moved on to other shipments, and then we emerged from our hiding places like ghosts from a grave. 23 of us, against a planet, against an empire. The odds were approximately terrible. We moved fast. Esiir had the route memorized, maintenance tunnels and service corridors, paths used by automated systems and low-level workers who'd grown complacent over centuries of peace. We killed when we had to, quietly, efficiently, left bodies in closets and hoped no one would notice until we were done. It took 3 hours to reach the thermal management access point. 3 hours of holding my breath and expecting alarms and watching Singh dispatch Vrynn guards with a precision that was beautiful and terrifying. 3 hours of remembering why I'd followed this woman through hell and back. The access tunnel was exactly where Esiir said it would be, a massive borehole, 3 meters across, descending into the planet's mantle at a 45-degree angle. Handholds for maintenance crews, emergency lighting every 50 meters, and at the bottom, 4,000 kilometers down, the master node. The purge cycle starts in 11 minutes, Esiir said. We need to reach the node chamber before it ends. 6 minutes inside the window, that's all we have. Then we climb fast, I said. We left half our people as rear guard. 12 of us descended, down into heat that made my tactical suit's cooling system scream. down into darkness, broken only by emergency lights and the faint glow of exotic matter reactions bleeding through the walls. Down into the heart of the empire that had broken so many lives. My arms burned. My lungs felt like they were breathing fire. But I kept climbing, because Esiir was ahead of me and Singh was behind me, and we'd come too far to stop. 4,000 kilometers, reduced to hand over hand, breath by breath, meter by meter. We reached the node chamber with 2 minutes left in the purge window. The chamber was vast, cathedral-sized, filled with technology I couldn't begin to understand. Geometric patterns of light and crystal and flowing energy. And at the center, suspended in some kind of stasis field, the master node, a perfect sphere, pulsing, alive. Esiir moved forward like she was in a trance, pulled the transmitter from her pack, activated it. The device hummed, began broadcasting. That's when the alarm started. "They know we're here," Singh shouted over the noise. "We've got maybe 3 minutes before..." The blast door exploded inward. Vrynn security, 20 of them, fully armored, weapons charged. We fought. God, we fought. But there were too many of them and too few of us, and I knew with perfect clarity that we weren't walking out of this chamber. Knew that the only question was whether Esiir's transmission would complete before they killed us all. I put myself between the Vrynn and Esiir. Felt rounds impact my armor. Felt something crack in my ribs. Kept firing. Kept standing. Watched Singh go down and scramble back up and keep fighting with a hole in her shoulder that should have been fatal. The transmitter reached 80%. 90, a Vrynn officer, larger than the others, moved through the chaos like a blade. Focused. Direct. Heading straight for Esiir. I tried to intercept. Too slow. He was going to reach her, going to stop the transmission, going to undo everything we'd sacrificed for. Esiir turned, looked at the officer, looked at me, and smiled. Then she grabbed the transmitter and ran, not away from the officer, toward him, directly into his path. She was small, fast. She ducked under his swing, rolled past his guard, and pressed the transmitter directly against the master node's stasis field, 100%. The transmission completed. For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber was silent except for breathing and the fading alarms. Then the node began to fail. It wasn't dramatic. No explosion, no fireworks, just light draining away, patterns dissolving. Energy dissipating like heat from a dying star. And somewhere above us, across the planet, across the empire, every quantum coupling system built on Vrynn technology began its cascade failure. Ships dropped out of FTL. Shields collapsed. Stations went dark. An entire empire's worth of infrastructure, dependent on a single point of failure, discovered what failure meant. The Vrynn officer stood frozen, staring at the dying node, understanding what had just happened, what it meant, how completely they'd been undone. He looked at Esiir with something I'd never seen in a Vrynn before. Fear. She met his gaze, spoke in their language. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Triumph, vindication, goodbye. Then the chamber began to collapse. The node's failure was destabilizing the entire facility. The mountain above us groaned. Cracks spread through walls. The floor tilted. "Run!" Singh grabbed my arm, pulled me toward the access tunnel. I grabbed Esiir. We ran together through chaos and falling rock and the death of an empire. We didn't all make it out. Lost 8 more people in the collapse, watched them disappear into crevasses or crushed under debris or simply fall behind and vanish into the dark. But Singh and Esiir and I climbed like our lives depended on it, which they did. Climbed through the collapsing tunnel and the failing emergency systems and the heat that should have killed us. We reached the surface as Vrynn Prime tore itself apart. The node's destruction had triggered cascading failures in every system connected to it. Power grids, atmospheric processors, defense networks, all of it tied together, all of it failing. We stole a small craft from the chaos, burned for orbit through a debris field that had been a defense station, jumped to FTL on emergency power and didn't stop until we were 3 systems away and absolutely certain we weren't being followed. Then we floated in the black between stars and watched the news feeds, watched the Vrynn Empire collapse in real time, watched their fleet drift helpless, watched their tributary species realize the masters were vulnerable, watched rebellions ignite across 18 systems, watched the Kythreen on Tarnus Prime and a dozen other worlds rise up and take back their lives. It took 6 months for the situation to stabilize, 6 months of chaos and violence and desperate fighting. The coalition tried to intervene, tried to restore order, but you can't put an empire back together after you've shown everyone the emperor was always naked. Some of the Vrynn worlds sued for peace, offered reparations, offered to rebuild as equals instead of overlords. Others fought to the last, chose death over adapting, went down believing their own mythology of supremacy. The galaxy called it the Vrynn Collapse. Historians argued about causes and implications and whether intervention would have prevented bloodshed. Politicians postured and made speeches and tried to claim credit or deflect blame. Nobody mentioned the human contractor and the Kythreen engineer who'd asked each other the wrong questions and chosen to pay the price. We disappeared. Singh and Esiir and I found a colony on the edge of explored space, small, quiet. A place where nobody asked about your past and everybody understood that some stories were better left untold. We bought a small ship, did some cargo runs, legitimate work, boring work. It was the best time of my life. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, if the cost was worth it, if I had the right to decide for millions of people that war was better than slavery. I don't have good answers, just the memory of Esiir's eyes in that cargo hold, and the question I couldn't not ask. What do you want? She wanted revenge, wanted freedom, wanted to hurt the empire that had taken everything from her. I gave her that choice. She made it, and the galaxy burned. They tell me I started a war. They're right. But I'd do it again, every single time, because some choices aren't about right or wrong. They're about whether you can live with yourself after, whether you can look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. I asked Esiir what she wanted. She told me. And I was human enough, foolish enough, to believe that sometimes the right thing and the terrible thing are the same thing, and you just have to choose which kind of terrible you can carry. War started that day. So did freedom. And in the end, that's the only choice that mattered. My name is Tyler Cass. I gave someone a weapon and asked them what they wanted to do with it. She chose to break the galaxy. I chose to help her. We're still living with the consequences, still figuring out what comes after revenge, still learning what it means to build instead of destroy, but we're doing it together. The fool who looked, the engineer who remembered, and the soldier who stayed. 3 people who survived the impossible and decided that maybe, just maybe, survival was enough. Sometimes, late at night, when the nightmares come, I still see that cargo hold. Still see her eyes. Still hear my own voice asking the question I should never have asked. And I still don't regret it. Not for a second. Because that's what humans do. We look. We choose. We pay the price. And we live with what comes after, whatever that turns out to be. The galaxy learned something important during the Vrynn collapse. Learned that humans don't always make sense. That we'll burn the world down for principles that can't be quantified or logic that can't be explained. That we're dangerous not because we're strong or smart or well-armed, but because we're willing to look at the impossible and say, let's try anyway. They call us fools. They're not wrong, but we're the kind of fools who changed everything. The kind who proved that empires aren't forever and that every system has a weakness if you're willing to search for it. The kind who asked, "What do you want?" and meant it. Humanity, fuck yeah. For all our flaws, for all our mistakes, for all the times we should have walked away and didn't, for the times we looked and couldn't pretend we didn't see. That's my story. That's our war. That's the day everything changed because a human asked a question and an enslaved engineer had been waiting 7 years to answer. Total vengeance, complete freedom, the price paid in full. And somewhere in the ashes of an empire, 18 billion Kythreen learned what it meant to be themselves again. Worth it. Every death, every sacrifice, every nightmare. Worth it. I'd pay that price again tomorrow. Because that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to give someone a choice and accept the consequences. That's what it means to look at injustice and decide you're going to be the fool who tries to stop it. We started a war. We ended an empire. We freed a species. And we're still here. Still breathing. Still figuring out what comes next. The galaxy will never forget. Neither will we. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be.